Welcome back and thanks for choosing to learn with IT Skills Academy. We continue to create the pharmacy management system dashboard. This is part 2 of it. In part 1 we created the HTML part of it, and so in this episode we create the PHP part of it that will make the whole dashboard dynamic. And so without so much ado, let's roll. But first, the intro. Well, so now we'll be starting with the business here. So we want to pull this from the database. You're going to forgive me because I have some hiccups a little bit. So I'll be writing the PHP script that will help us to fetch the closing and the opening date. So just come and say PHP, the opening tag. And we're also going to close it down here. Alright, so now inside the opening and closing PHP, I'll just come and say require database connection. So with that, I'll just say require, inside the double quote, we're just going to have the path to the script that connects to the database. So that is includes. So unfortunately we don't have it in that folder. We don't have it in that includes folder. So that means we have it in this other include folder that is outside the main folder, that is the dashboard, that is outside the dashboard, because currently we are in the index within the dashboard folder. So for that we're just going to step one step backwards. So that is just like that. So now we are able to connect to the database successfully, because now we have included the con.php, which is the script that connects us to the database. Alright, so that out of the way, we are now creating another variable here, that is SQL, and in this we are basically writing the select statement. So select, sorry, this should be inside quotes. So we say select all we are selecting all the information from the info table that we have just seen. We can even just select the opening and closing date. We can write that here, but just to make the work easy, we just select all, just in case we need any other information from that specific table. So this semicolon should come outside here. Now we'll create yet another variable. This one will store the results, so we're just going to call it res, short form for results, and we're just going to say is equals, and here we write the MySQL query. So MySQLi underscore query, and this will have the arguments con. So we are checking if we're able to connect to the database successfully. So this variable is within this con.php. So if we are not able to connect this successfully, then it will also not be able to read this con.php, this con variable. So that's why we had to include this, so that now it can be able to also read the variable con, which is just that script or that line that connects to the database. And now here we have the SQL. So this is the statement that we have on top here. So we are checking if it was successful. So we are checking if it was successful, and if it was successful, we are now storing the information there. Yeah, so we are not specifically storing, but we're just checking these two to see that they return true. So now after that, we now want to check if the rest is true. So we want to check, as I've said, if this one is successful and this one is successful. So it's only then that we'll now be able to fetch the data from the database. So it's only then that will fetch data from the database. So for that, we use an if statement. So we just come and say if, and for the condition it will be if less, which is the variable we just have just on top there, is equal true. So if it returns true, then it means the connection is successful, and the select statement is also successful or ran successfully. So now we are saying if that is successful, first what we want to do is to do a count. We want to do a count of the number of rows that we have in that specific table, that is the info table. So how many rows do we have there? So to fetch or to count the rows, we're just going to use the MySQLi num underscore rows. So MySQLi underscore num underscore rows, and this one will have that argument res. Yeah, just for the connection to the database. Yeah, so that now will help us to count the number of rows in this specific table. And now again we are going to have a nested if. So inside this if, we're going to have yet another if statement, and for this one we'll give it the condition of if the count is less than, sorry, not less than, but greater than 0. So if a count is greater than 0, then it means we have some records, because records will be within the rows. So if there is a row that is existing, then it means there is a record that is existing, because records will only exist in rows, and if there are no records, then there are no rows. So if count is greater than 0, then it means we have records, and now for that we'll fetch the records. So we want to fetch all the records within this table. So for that case, we are going to use the while loop, so that can be able to loop through the whole table, or through all the rows that we have to fetch the data. So for that we'll say while, and so the while will have the parameters the first one will be low. So we are going to create a variable and call it low. You can also call it rows, and we will check. This is just like the condition that will have to be checked before we run anything. So we are checking if low, sorry, we are not running any condition. So yes. Alright, so the first thing will be So now inside this we are going to say that now inside this, basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable and call it row. You can also call it rows, and we are going to set it to be equal to the MySQLI underscore fetch underscore assoc. So basically we are using the associative array. We're using the associative array, and we'll also have it with the parameters res. So now that basically will help us to fetch the data, and the data that is fetched will be stored in this variable. The data that is fetched will be stored in this variable row, and for that case we are going to see ourselves using that specific variable that we have created, just to be able to get the information that we have stored in that specific row variable. So for that, down here we're just going to store the data now in specific variables, and because we just want true, we're just going to have a true. So the first one will be the opening, the opening date, and that will be equal to the variable that we have on top here, that is row, because we have some information stored there, and now we just specify the specific column, and that will be inside single quotes the opening date. And we're just going to have a similar one for the closing date. So we'll just duplicate that and just modify this to read closing. Just like that. And now what we want to do is we want to embed some HTML code here, because we want to have this H6 inside this while loop. We want to have the H6 inside this while loop, so that now if we have several then there will be a con, like we can be able to get the two all at the same time. And if we had many records, then it would have made more sense. So we're just going to embed the HTML code here, and to do that, what you're going to do first is to close the PHP tag, and we are also now going to open it down here, such that the curly brackets are within the closing and the opening PHP tags. And now within this, that means now inside here we are not inside the PHP tags, we are outside the PHP tag. We can now be able to grab this and have it inside here. Sorry, we grab it again, and we want to have it inside here. And so now instead of this, we are going to get it from the database. So we just have the PHP opening and closing tags. Sorry. So that is PHP, and we can just come and say echo, and we are echoing first the opening, and let's call it date. and the closing date. Sorry, we should not have it like that. Let me just see. Let's see if that will work. If it will not work, then we just change it a little bit. So let's get to a browser and see how this will look like. Alright, so we are getting an error here. So the way I've noticed that there is an error is because of the beaming of this thing. So this road here, so it means we have an error somewhere, and that one I think is with the include. So it is not include, but it is include. That is, if I'm not wrong, if we can double check that. So it is the include and not include, and that's why we are getting the error there. So if we now come and refresh that page again, we should at least have the results. Yeah, and that is now what we have from the database. We're able to fetch that successfully. Although it is not correct, we can just try to modify it from the database and see if we are going to see that change appear here. And that was updated successfully. Alright, so now we continue to the medicine cells. So back to the index.php. So for the medicine cells, this one will be a little bit simpler. So because we have already included the database connection, we don't need to have it here. So for that, we're just going to go direct to fetching the medicine cells. So first of all, as usual, we'll have the PHP opening and closing tags. The PHP opening and closing tags, and we'll first of all create a variable here. So that is SQL will be equal to, and here we are selecting, or we are writing a select query. So double quotes, and we say select, and here we are selecting the total sales for all the medicines sold. So for that, we are going to say so for that, we are going to say select sum, and we are selecting the sum as total because we want the total of the a column that we have called total as total. So this is the column for the one that we want to get the sum of. So that's why we are saying select sum total as total. So if you have a different column name that has the values that you want to sum, then you would have those or the name of the column in these two areas here. So select sum as total, and this one is from sales. So we have a table that we have called sales. This is where all the sales are stored. So we want to get the total for that column that we have called total in the sales table. And now we are going to of course, as usual, check the database connection and also if the select query was successful. So for that we say res is equals to, and here we are writing the MySQLi query, and it will have the parameters con and also the variable SQL. And now finally we are creating another variable. I'll call it data or any other name, and this one will help us now to fetch the data. So it will be equal to MySQLi I underscore fetch underscore assoc. Just like that. And now we can now be able to just come below here and echo the total. So now down here in our h2 we get this dummy value. We have the PHP opening and closing tags, and here we'll echo the variable data. We have the information stored in this variable, and this will be the total. So just like that. So let's refresh the browser and see if we get the results. And wow, we have the results as 0, so that means we have not done any sales today. So let's now continue to the medicine count, and the medicine count will again be almost similar, but in this case we'll be counting the number of rows. In this case we'll be counting the number of rows and not the sum. So again, for that we write the PHP opening and closing tags. So PHP, and first of all it's to fetch the data, so we have to write the select statement. So SQL is equals to select all, from and we'll be selecting this from the store. It is in a table called store that we have all the drugs, so we want to count and see how many there are. So now below that we're going to have the res variable for the results, and this one will have the MySQLi underscore query, and it will have the arguments con and SQL. so now we can count the number of rows. So count is equals to, and then we use the MySQLi underscore num underscore rows, the variable res, and as simple as that, we already have the number of rows, so we can now just come and echo the count here. So again, PHP echo variable count. Yeah, as simple as that. So let's check on the browser and see the results. And there we have the results. The medicine count is 11, so we have at least 11 different types of drugs. Now for the expired, this one will be a little bit different because we need to check the expiry date for a specific drug, and we are going to compare that with the date today. We want to compare that with the date today. So if the expiry date of a specific drug is beyond today, is greater than today, then it means that drug is expired. Or rather, is less than today's date, not greater than. So if it is less than today's date, then it means it is expired, like we have bypassed the expiry date of that drug. So we'll just come and copy this PHP script that we use to collect data from the info table, and I just want us to save time because I had already explained this step by step. So I still want to use it to get the expiry date of every medicine. So for that, I'm just going to have it somewhere here. Let me just have it outside this. Yeah, so at least we have it there. So all this script is just to help us to get the expiry date. I know you can use the join tables, but that will be a bit complex for this scope of this video. So I'm just going to change this to store. So that is now picking data from the store, and I'll just now change this to expiry date. And we don't need this for now, so I'll just get rid of that. So we're just going to leave that script there. So that one is just to help us to get the expiry date, so that we can compare that expiry date of a given drug with the date today. Well, now to be able to have the today's date, I've created this variable, and I've set it to be equal to date into brackets the format of the date, and this one is giving us the date today. So basically this script here just helps us to get today's date. So for that, now we can be able to compare the expiry date of a specific drug with today's date, and if it is less than today's date, then that drug is expired, and we're just going to count it. So now we leave that script there and we come down here, and now here we are going to have the PHP. And we want to count the number of rows that contains the expired drugs. So for that we're going to have the SQLI or SQL is equals to, and we write the select statement. So that is select all from, we are selecting all from the store, and this will have a condition, and this is where the expiry date is less than today. So that is the variable today that gives us the today's date. So today. So if there is any drug whose expiry date is less than today's date, we should count that. So we store the, first of all we check the connection. So less is equals to MySQLI query, and here we are testing the con in the SQL. And so now we do the count. So I'm going to create a variable and call it count. Underscore expired. Is equals to MySQLI underscore num underscore rows, and we are counting. We should also check the connection. So less. And so now with that we can be able to echo the count expired, because this counts the drugs whose expiry date is less than today. So this one should be date. Expiry date is equals to today, so we just can come here and replace this expiry date with count underscore expired, which is what we have here. Yeah, so as simple as that. Alright, so that is done. Now for the opening balance, to save time, I'm just going to come and paste the code that we have on top here. Sorry, I'm just going to come and copy this code that we have here, the one that we have used to select the expiry date. So that is just to help us save time, because if you have been watching this video from the start, we have explained all of this code here. So I'm just grabbing this because it's similar to what I intend to create. So I just copy it and then we modify it with you step by step. So just come down here in the opening balance component here, and I just want to paste it somewhere here. Yes, and we even don't need to require the database again because we have already required it on top there. So we are creating a variable called SQL with the select statement, and for this one we are selecting all from the info. So the info table is the one that contains the opening balance that we need. We're also checking the database connection and if this statement was successful using the MySQL query, and we are checking if the res is equal true, and if it is equal true, we are first of all counting the number of rows. Then after that we are seeing if the count is less than greater than 0, we are now fetching the records using the associative array. We're now just going to change this to read opening balance. The opening balance, and we are going to get rid of this. So now at least we have the opening balance there, and now we can be able to grab this H2 and embed it inside here. And now here we can echo the opening balance. Okay, so that's correct, but we have it in the long place. We should not have it here, rather it should be here. So maybe to resolve that, you can just come and grab all of this. In fact, I'm just going to, okay, let me just grab all of this. And I'm just going to cut it, and instead of having it there, we should have it here in the opening balance component. So we paste it there. For this one, we are just going to work on it later for the account payable because it requires some other information. So for that, we're just going to have the H2 and we can just put a certain value there, maybe say 50,000. And that works well. So we have the opening balance there as we have it on the database somewhere here. So we'll skip this for now because it will require some other information of the suppliers and all that. So we're just going to go direct to the transactions. So for that, I'm just going to skip that and come down here to the count of all the transactions. And so just below the H4, we're going to have the PHP tag as usual, PHP. And the first thing that we're going to do is to of course select the data from the database. That is the main aim here. So variable SQL is equals to select statement. So we select, and here we are selecting all from cells, and it will have a condition, and it will be where the sales date. So this table cells has the sales date column. Sales date is equal to, remember we created a variable that is giving us the today's date, so that is the today. So we have a PHP code that is helping us to get the today's date, and we have the today's date being stored in this variable today. If I may just show you here, so we have it here. So this is the statement that is at least giving us the today's date. That's what we are using. That's what we are using down here. Well, now after that we're just going to say that the less is equals to MySQL query it will have the con, it will have the less, rather it will have the SQL. And so now we can be able to count. So we just come and say variable count is equals to MySQLi underscore num underscore loss, the variable res. We can even give it a different name there, count trans, so that is count transactions, so that we cannot confuse it with another count that maybe we have in a script. And so now with that we can just be able to echo PHP echo count underscore trans. Yeah, and that's it. Okay, so we need to fix this. There is a problem here. We need to get a value, not a date. So this one, instead of being expired date, we need to echo the count expired, which is giving us the count of all the expired drugs. So this one, just have it like that. Yes, so now if we refresh that, and collectively we have that being 0. So the last thing that we want to do is to fetch the patients who are awaiting those who have not been subbed. And so again, to save some time, I'll just come and grab this code here, and as usual I modify it a little. So that is this one here. So I grab this and I just want to have it in the patient's awaiting area. So I scroll up to that point, and I just want to have it below the T head. So below the T head here, so just have it pasted there. And now that we have this, we'll be modifying it a little. So first we get rid of the database connection. We already have that catered for, and this one will be from the patients table. Patients. And it will have a condition, and the condition will be where I'm writing my own things, where the status is equals to 0 in single quote, so 0. So what I've done in this case is, when a patient is added into the patient's table, they'll have a default status of 0, and when the patient is discharged, the status will change to 1. So if your status is equals to 0, then it means you have not been discharged and you're still waiting. So that's why we have the 0 there. So that one is catered for. And now here, instead of the expiry date, we're just going to have several records here. So we want to have the patient number. Let's just double check from here: the patient number, the patient name, date of birth, and yeah. So we start with the patient number. So we're just storing this information in a variable. Just a reminder here. So get rid of that. So this should be patient underscore number. And the same case to this below, patient underscore number. And we also want the patient the patient name. So just change this to name. And we also want the date of birth. So that one I think should be DOB. So that is DOB. And so now what we are going to do is we are going to grab the T body, this one being HTML, and we are going to have it or embed it inside this while loop. So we paste it there, And now here we just come and now echo the actual data. So PHP and echo variable patient name. Or rather, the first one is patient number. And I'm just going to copy that, paste it here, paste it here, and this one will be DOB, this one will be name. For this one I want it to be a button, so I'll just come and have it as button. Or rather, instead of having it as a button like that, let me just have it as a link, and then give it the class that will make it look like a button. For this one, it will be going to the page prescription .php, and here we'll be grabbing a few records and passing them through this link. So for that, I'm going to say question mark is equals to the first thing that we want to get is the patient number. So I'll just come and say invoice invoice. Sorry, this equals should be here. So question mark invoice is equals to, and here what I just want to do is to pass the patient number. That's why I'm doing all of this. So PHP, and I want to echo the patient underscore number, and I also want to echo the patient ID. So I'll just come and say and, so here I want to echo the patient ID, so just say PHP echo ID. So I should set this to be ID is equals so now after that we can give it a class. Class is equals so btn can give it a 1. Yes, I think that's it. But we also need to have the patient ID here. So we should just come and say ID and ID. Right, so we're able to get the two patients, the sample patient 2, John Doe, date of birth, but we need to have this button with the name. So we scroll down here. Within this anchor tag, we add attend or any other name that you may want. So attend. Yeah, so if we refresh that now, we should have this button having a name. Yeah, and as you can see now, we have the attend there, and below here we are able to see the patient number and the ID. So if I click on attend, this now takes me here where I'm able to see the patient name, the patient number, and the date of birth, and I can now be able to prescribe some medicine to that client. Okay, so let me just try to add a patient and see if the patient will appear there. Yeah, and as you can see, the patient appears there. So that marks the end of this episode where we were creating this beautiful dashboard. So we have these various components, and we have the patients awaiting table down here. So if the video was great, kindly give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below.